so cool that you got to do that in marriage. You said 27 years coming
27 years in August. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't think he basically has given me permission to share anything I feel compelled to share. So it was probably a little over a year ago that we were married, and at the time, I went straight to Bible college out of high school. And so when we got married, I had, I was always kind of this wild free spirit as a teenager and child. And then I recognized that doesn't fit in the mold of Christianity. And so when I was around 18, 19, I shifted into this, I'm going to find a husband and be a submissive wife. And I'm going to do all of these things. And so literally for 20 years, I shut down that the wild feminine or the wild dark feminine kind of thing.
And huge aspects of you.
Oh my God. It's so crazy that for so many, I know a lot of people in my life, when they, the people that knew me through those years, they probably look at me now and they're like, oh my God, she's changed so much. And they see it as a negative. But it's really, I just came back to myself. I just came back to who I really was. And it's actually who he fell in love with. He got to see that wild part of me in the bedroom. So he knew who I was, And so, but for so many years, I was just quiet or maybe not quiet, but I bought the whole, I need to be a submissive wife to be a good Christian. I want to be this good Christian, godly woman. And so to kind of come into this place of, and what went with that was the patriarchal view of man is over woman and the kids are under the woman. There's an umbrella thing that's on Pinterest. I've seen
the hierarchy.
The hierarchy of people. And it's oh, actually we're all equals. We're all on this journey of equality. And there's roles that masculinity naturally biologically functions in, and then there's these roles that women or the feminine biologically functions in. And to recognize that, because I've always been the spiritual leader in our relationship, and he just kind of followed along, but I would say, oh, I'm being submissive kind of thing, just to fit that mold that patriarchy created for me. And so what's happened is that I have stepped into my role as the initiatrix, the priestess, the goddess, the woman that he is I want to follow that. I want to be a rock for that. I want to be solid for that. And it's helped him step, the thing I most identify with is probably the queen, which of course I love the Queen's Code. If y'all haven't read that, it's amazing.
Ooh, I haven't read that, but I'm glad we're getting into archetypes now.
So the Queen's Code is phenomenal. And it's basically I recognize that I feel, and I have always felt I'm a queen, I would have denounced that earlier on, but especially I look back at myself, I'm heck yes, I've always been that queen. And so have you, so have every one of us. Well, he is a king. And for me to be yes, I'm a queen, but I won't have anything less than a king, has been this portal for him to step through and say, yeah, I can be that for you. I can be that. So it's me saying you are a king, hell yeah. And I'm sure we can look throughout history of these powerful queens that help their men be these kingly, but there's not a you're over me kind of thing. It's equality, but functioning in the roles that we were created to, function in.
Right. And I think it's really neat that as the feminine energy, sorry about the dog who's up in your,
I love the dog.
Up in your grill.
Yeah.
She's really sweet. I like to have her out, and she likes girl time. But I think it's really neat that as the feminine energy comes into health, where we can look at our shadows, and often hidden in the feminine shadow is manipulation. And how do I meet my needs? And get my person to show up with me. And so when that expresses in a manipulative way, it can look like in Al-Anon and Coda, they talk about the 4 M's: mothering, managing, martyring, and manipulating.
Yes.
And so, we might use guilt trips.
Yeah.
Or crying or, or blame
my
shifting
goodness.
and things like that. Or, you're martyring and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it
Yes.
anyway because
Yes.
I'm trying to egg you into performing in this way.
Mhm.
And so I feel like when I see women like you who have stepped up into their full healthy feminine,
Mhm.
they're men, assuming that your partner is in it.
Right.
And Mr. Mike, Mr. Mike is in it. I love Mr. Mike. I haven't met him. I love the tales of Mr. Mike, but it's inspiring. And a man does want to step up and be his best self. And I think that it's, you don't need to manipulate or inspire from that place, to use another AA and Al-Anonism. It's attraction, not promotion. I don't need to sell you on something. I can show you what the healing looks like. And should you join me? Wonderful.
Yeah.
In the case of my marriage was 5 years, and it was over from like day one. It was basically like, oh, this isn't going to work. It's a ticking time bomb. He and I had irreparable damage to our trust, all the deal breakers, like it, to stay in that would have just been self-sacrificial. That wasn't my path, and that's not my belief system. So I eventually made my way out of it. But I reflect on what a broken marriage like that could have been if the trust wasn't irreparable.
Right.
And I think it's really inspiring to see women like you who had a good marriage anyway, but then came into their wholeness and were able to heal enough to set a solid foundation that when their masculine energy or their man or whoever had to go through their healing, it didn't rock everything. Yeah. And so I don't think that any relationship is doomed, even if there's a lot of healing work to do.
Yeah.
But I think often the feminine does need to go on her journey and get stable and solid with her feminine, and then enough of that masculine energy to hold steady as that man rises up.
Right.
And I don't know why I feel like that's the order, but I think that there is an order to that.
I do. And I think that it's, I think if you look, at one point I did some work with Heifer International. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but it's a nonprofit that provides like animals to people in third world countries or in impoverished areas that help them get out of poverty by like producing things they can sell, milk, eggs, stuff like that.
I was going to say, do they want that animal?
But I remember going to a retreat there at their place in, I think it's in Arkansas. It's been a while. But they explained that they give the animals to the women, not to the men, because the women are the ones that make sure their families are okay. And it is the mother, like we're getting into archetypes without even trying to. It's the mother in us that is like, we're going to make sure our kids are okay. We're going to make sure that everything is good. And so I think that naturally we're created to be that, like to be the priestess, like we are. And I know like in cultures throughout, I mean, it's been so hard for me to be able to even talk about this publicly, because it does go against the Christian, the Christian idea, like the fundamentalist idea that like men are the leader. But that just comes from patriarchy. That just comes from men that wanted power. And, I could get into like hours of that conversation, but it's not the way things work. And so naturally women are the leader and the priestess, and eventually like women do tend to help men step into their role of leadership, but it is the way it is. I mean, we can look at all kinds of reasons why, but like if anybody would argue that a woman's a sexually empowered woman does, like, they rule the world, we rule the world, like My sister-in-law, I don't think she'll watch this. But I have somewhere, I shouldn't have even said that. But her comment is kitty rules, which, they're like just being funny, but like your necklace, that word, like it's that, I mean, a sexually empowered woman rules the world. And the key to this is that women become conscious, because you talked about like that manipulation. I mean, I was the queen of manipulation, and I didn't mean to be. I didn't realize it at the time. But once I started doing my work and healing my trauma and healing sexually, I started to recognize like, oh my gosh, I have been using this as a tool to manipulate for my entire life. And to say like, oh, wow, like that's not empowerment. That's actually like extremely detrimental to everyone, myself especially. And so to heal in a way that like recognize, I mean, just this morning, I was telling you, my husband and I had this conversation about something that like things didn't go my way. Like I was expecting something to happen on a house we're building and they're not. And my mind immediately wants to go into blame mode. And we laugh about it now because we're both conscious enough to recognize that it's absolutely hilarious. But like I can stub my toe and immediately my mind goes to blaming him. Like it's so hilarious. And so I just laugh at myself and we laugh together about it. But I think that is the shadow. That's definitely the shadow of the feminine, or it definitely was mine, to say, well, I did this and it's your fault. Like this is your problem, and try to make him fix me. And I mean, this is really deep stuff, because I mean, I was depressed for years and years. And I recognized one day, and there's a lot more to it than just this. I was also deconstructing like religious beliefs and stuff. So that was part of it. But one of the things I came to realize is that whenever I had my first son 24 years ago, I had postpartum depression. And I had not had depression before that. And my husband showed up for me in a way that was just indescribable. Like it didn't matter where he was coming to me when I was depressed. Well, I very unconsciously, I'm not saying like I intentionally did this, but unconsciously, like anytime I needed attention, I was depressed. And so whenever my eyes were open to that, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And as soon as I made that connection, I'm not saying I was never depressed anymore because I had some other things going on, but it completely shifted it for me. And at least it wasn't like, I was doing it over and over, and I could see it. It was like, I just need to be seen. And I could say to him, instead of, hey, I'm depressed, I need you to come home, I could say, hey, I'm feeling a little invisible. Like, can you just give me some extra attention? And that's consciousness, is being completely honest about what you need. Or, I mean, I'm like, hey, I need you to come home and make love to me. Like, I need to feel like super sexy and witnessed. And that's such a beautiful thing, to take the shadow and be like, oh, there's the light. Yeah. The light is truth.
Yeah. And it's beautiful to be able to recognize when you are in your shadow, because I think initially off the bat, you hear about like, ooh, people manipulate each other. And it's like, yeah, like everyone does. And it can feel very shameful to claim that. But as you accept that this is a reality of healing and of growing up into your adult self, that doesn't mean you're 18 and now you're a grown up, but like your actual healed adult self, it becomes more okay to, I think it's helpful to hear other people sharing and then to use it as a mirror to be like, oh, you know what? They claimed it. I also see that in myself. I can claim it too. And once you have a level of acceptance for it, you become more okay with looking for that pattern. And so there's nothing wrong. Like we manipulate each other because that is a habitual pattern, because it proved its efficacy. And so there's nothing inherently wrong about it. It's just once you start to become conscious and you're able to make choices, what choices are you going to choose? And that doesn't mean you're going to do it perfectly. Like, there's going to be lots of shit still in that shadow, even after years. Cause like, how long has your healing journey been? You said,
probably 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm about the same. And like, I got to tell you, the first 5 years, like
Oh,
It was devout in that
Yeah.
I was searching,
mm-hmm.
but once that 5-year mark hit and I had some foundation, everything sped up because I
Yes,
knew what I was
exactly.
looking for.
Yes.
I knew what I was doing. And like, and even now, like I catch those glimpses of like, I'm healed. Like
Right.
I know everything about myself. I'm going to catch all of the shadow moments. It's like, no, you're not.
I know.
And you have to rely heavily into your real friends that tell you the truth and are like,
Right.
Exactly. They're going to call you on your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a big part of that too, for me has been when the shadow is there, like when the manipulator shows up, because she does, like my little inner manipulator is like very crafty and manipulative.
Mhm.
And so there is this idea of like, oh, I need to cast that away. I need to not be that way. And just like you try to shove it out of your psyche. Like, I don't want that. And so what has been so important and healing to me is to be able to recognize it, or whenever I do recognize it, make space and love that part of me. Like I mean, we all develop things for certain reasons, but it's like seeing the little girl that only got things sometimes because she manipulated, and like picking her up and loving her and just saying, I got you. Like, you don't have to go to him. Like, you don't have to get him to see you. Like, I see you, and I'm going to rock you, and I'm going to love you, and I'm going to take care of you. So it's not pushing anything out. It's loving it into wholeness, like integrating that little manipulator and all the shadow selves, all those unintegrated parts of ourselves, loving them into wholeness.
All the little ghost children.
Oh my goodness. Like, oh, yes.